This is the Become the Lion podcast. If you are aiming to become the top in your industry, not second, not above average, the top, then you have come to the right place. Become the Lion will provide you with weekly insights and motivation needed from our guests on how to escape the common herd that society lives in. If you're looking to change your life, then get ready. Welcome to Become the Lion.
This is Trevor Nicholas from Become the Lion. Today in the show, we have David Allen. David is the author of the international best-selling book, Getting Things Done. His book has been published in over 28 languages, and Time magazine heralded it as the defining self-help business book of its time. David, welcome to Become the Lion.
Hey, Trevor. Happy to be here. Thanks.
And David, your book, Getting Things Done, is about productivity. I wanted to ask you, how did you get started as a productivity expert?
I didn't really think of myself as a productivity expert when I got started, Trevor. I mean, I was looking for a good job. After 35 different jobs I'd had in my life, I said, I don't seem to find the thing that really fits to me. What I was always interested in what people were doing, how they were doing it. I'm kind of a lazy guy. I was always interested in, how much more easily can I do anything? And I wound up with the different careers and professions I had, just wound up being a good number two guy. I really helped friends of mine that were entrepreneurs and starting their own businesses and, so forth. They seemed to know what they wanted to do. I didn't, but I still had to pay the rent. So, I would come in and just say, okay, let me be sort of a version of a minor chief operating officer. So I just come in and look around and say, okay, how are we doing what you're doing? How could we do that more efficiently, effectively, easily, frankly? So I wound up helping folks sort of help their, improve their processes. I mean, now they call that process improvement. I wasn't sophisticated enough back in 1981 to know what that was. But I just said, okay, let's fix it, make it easier, as lazy as I am. And then discovered that once I fixed it, then I kind of got bored. And so, let me go find something else to do. And then I discovered they pay people to do that. They call them something, consultant. Wow, now I are one, right? So 1981, hung out my shingle, started my own little consulting practice. And I also, Trevor, had another, important vector, which is in training in the martial arts and meditation and spiritual practices and so forth. I discovered how cool it was to have a clear head. It was much nicer to not be distracted or bothered by things you're worrying about or things that are not finished and they keep popping into your head. And that it was a very good reason, especially in the martial arts, to have a clear head when four people jump you in a dark alley. So there was a lot of practical training about how do you manage your focus, manage your attention. These days, they sort of falls a lot under the mindfulness sort of banner. But back then, it was just how do I focus my attention? How do I do that? How do I keep clear? And I loved that space and found that it was much easier to feel freer and much more at peace inside of myself if I could, find a way to shut the noise up internally. And so I got hungry to do that, and both for myself personally. And then I found that the techniques I was discovering, little bits here, little bits there, that helped in that process. That all the new clients I was working with, when I turned around and used the technique with them, it was a lot easier for them to focus. A lot easier for them to be able to, have more space to focus on the more meaningful things that were important to them. And I went, wow, that's cool. So I didn't really understand what I had discovered and that it was unique. It took me about 20 or 25 years to actually figure that out. As I started out, I would just say, well, here's just a better job where I can just sort of keep going with stuff that I enjoy doing and do different things, keep me from being bored. And, at the same time, I was learning, hey, that really works and that really works. So there was no one major grand epiphany of all this. It was really a long string of epiphanettes that I began to put together. But I think I had that focus and then started to realize, hey, people seem to be interested in this. It was also a time when time management was starting to become kind of a very popular buzz idea in the corporate world back in the 80s. And I didn't have a lot of experience in the corporate world, certainly not in the corporate training world at all. But somebody came across what I was doing, and they said, wow, that's really cool. Why don't you bring that into our company. Can you design some training around this that you produce the same kind of results you're getting with your clients? And I said, well, I'll try. So that was how I kind of stumbled into this, was actually creating and being asked to build a kind of an educational format to make more conscious and more accessible this methodology that I was beginning to pull together. And that was really the start of this. And I thought of myself as just Mr. Lazy, not productivity guru. So I was like, well, how much easier can I do whatever I was going to do? So I didn't have a big strategic plan to become the productivity guru as I'm named these days. I'm not particularly comfortable. I don't like that, because my stuff is really more about, look, guys, it's just a technique. It's just a methodology. It's just it's something that you don't have to listen to me, try it out, test it out, see if it works for you. I just made conscious and objective a lot of what we always do anyway when things really work and when we really are productive, and just made that more accessible to people to be able to make that more available to them. So it kind of fooled me that the book became as popular as it did and spread around the world.
When you were discovering these techniques, were you reading about it, or were you just experimenting on your own?
It was all street smarts. I've never had any traditional business or psychology or time management training in my life. This was all, hey, let me try that out. Let me try that out. And a lot of non-traditional stuff. And I had 2 or 3 mentors that taught me various pieces of this, because they discovered various pieces of this, and I tried it out. But this was all very, very practical, let me try this out. Wow, that really works. And discovered things that without fail, if people actually did these simple techniques, it produced greater focus and greater control. And those are the 2 key elements of self-management.
What do you think are the main causes in today's society that causes someone to be unproductive?
Well, Trevor, you got to back up a second and say, what does productivity mean? What does productive mean? Well, productive quite simply means producing some desired result. In other words, if you go on a vacation to relax and you don't relax, that's an unproductive vacation. If you go to a party to boogie and you don't boogie, that's an unproductive party. So productivity is really quite relative to what it is you're trying to produce. And you could be trying to produce either a thing like a Porsche, or a big house, or a successful business, or an experience called more love, more happiness, more peace, more relaxation, more fun in my life. And so all of those things are subject to, are you productive about that or not? But I think the 2 key elements, in a lot of what GTD or Getting Things Done and my methodology came down to were the 2 core elements of productivity, which are outcome and action. What am I trying to produce? And that could be a thing, it could be an experience. And what's the next action I would need to take? How do I allocate my resources, my focus, my attention, my activity to actually make that happen? So the biggest reason people are unproductive is they have this nagging, gnawing sense internally that something ought to be different or change about their bank, about their health, about their relationship, about their company, but they haven't clarified exactly what the final outcome is, nor have they decided exactly what the next step is that I need to take to make it happen. So interestingly enough, the 2 key elements of productivity don't come automatically and don't seem to come naturally to people. You actually have to be trained to think that way. So I just uncovered those things. So the reason most people are not productive is they might want something to happen, but they haven't decided exactly what that is, nor have they decided what they would need to do next to actually make it happen.
So essentially you're telling someone if they want to have a desired outcome, they have to clarify the actions that they need to take to achieve that outcome?
Both. Well, come on. If you play soccer, if you play basketball, if you play football or anything like that, you run onto the field, what are the 2 things on your mind? Right? What are the 2 most important things on your mind? Number 1, where's the goal? Number 2, what's the next play? Right? So there's no difference. This is just the game of life. Where's the goal? What's the next play? And so if you ask entrepreneurs like, okay, what are you trying, what would success mean to you? Yeah, and it's great to do it at multiple horizons. Yeah, 5 years from now, I want to have X gazillion dollars and whatever. When I want to create the best software that does X, Y, or Z. That's cool. Those are good things to have as a reference point internally. But over the next 6 months, 12 months, what do you want to have true? And by the way, given that, what are the projects you've got? What do you need to have true about your credit line? What do you need to have true about your advisory board? What do you need to have true about your team? And so sitting down and thinking from an outcome basis at those multiple levels is going to move you forward light years in terms of your productivity. And then, of course, that still doesn't tell you what you actually physically need to do. You need to take all of those and drive them down to, okay, come on, Susan or John or Jose, what's the very, very next action you would need to take? You've had nothing else to do but make your new company successful. What's the very next thing you're going to do? Where are you going to go? And so, sort of marrying the outcomes to what's the physical activity that needs to line up that's going to make that move forward. That takes thinking. It takes decision making. It doesn't come naturally, and it takes cognitive horsepower. The problem is most people are so distracted by so many things that they've not managed very well that their head is just bouncing around and full of all kinds of crud, frankly, a lot of residue and a lot of unclarified things. And so this methodology, which is take all that stuff, identify it, decide actions, decide outcomes of things you're going to move on and things you're not going to move on, make those decisions, and then build an external brain. And most people are trying to use their head as their office to both remember, remind, and prioritize. And your head is an absolutely crappy office. We know that now from the cognitive scientists. But your brain did not evolve to do that. It evolved to basically, make sure you didn't get eaten by a tiger and to see where there are berries you can eat. So your brain's really good at walking into the present tense and noticing danger and noticing cool things, but it's not very good at a past and future kind of an event. So, learning to externalize all this stuff, build an external system, and make the appropriate decisions you need to make about the commitments you have about all that. That's quite a feat. It's a martial art, actually.
I don't know if you've ever heard the quote, but it goes, "The sharpest mind is no match for the dullest pencil." And it just goes back to what you were saying, how they should always be they have an idea to write it down instead of keeping it inside their head.
Yeah. If you just keep it inside your head, it's okay you're not going to write everything down. You might be thinking about an idea or about a project. That's what your head's for, but not thinking of it. And most people keep thinking of something without making any progress on improving it in their thinking. They're just being reminded of it by some little thing. Don't forget, Trevor, don't forget. And they've got this great monkey inside your head, and that takes up psychic bandwidth, and you don't have an infinite amount. So the more of those kind of open loops and commitments that you have not externalized and put in some sort of trusted system so your mind can let it go, you're probably not worried about where you need to be 2 weeks from Tuesday at 3:00 in the afternoon. Why? Because that data has been put in a trusted system, then you have a trusted behavior to look at your calendar regularly. So that's just a simple example of what I'm talking about. It's just that's just only a very minor portion of the things you actually need to manage in your life. And most people do that with their calendar because, if you forget an appointment, you're kind of screwed. So the pain of not handling it and not having a system about those kind of things is too great. And that's why people are at least reasonably good at keeping track of appointments, using an external system called a calendar. But, most people, 95% of their life is not on their calendar, but it's still in the same way. Oh, I need to look into getting a new checkup for my doctor, or I need to look into extending my credit line, or I need to do tires on my car. And oh my God, this new holiday is coming up, and we need to plan that. And should I hire a chief marketing officer or not? So those are the kind of things that most people are not handling with the same kind of rigor that you do with your calendar, but you need to.
Let's say someone has all these ideas like you just mentioned. How do they externalize them to make sure that they get accomplished?
Write them down. Jeez, this is not rocket science. Pen and paper require no Wi-Fi, no batteries. So get it out of your head to begin with. And there's actually a 5-stage process, and that we've sort of recognized and discovered about how you get your kitchen under control or your company under control. And the first step is to capture the stuff. That means you just need to write it down. Yeah, mom, bank, health, credit line, chief marketing officer. Great. Write those things down, but then don't leave that there. If you leave that there, you just become compulsive list managers with lists that still stress you out when you look at them. You need to go through the content of each one of those lists and say, okay, then you need to go to step 2, which is clarify. So there's first capture, then there's clarify. And clarify means, okay, what are you going to do about mom? You had one. Why'd you write it down? Oh, her birthday's coming. What are you going to do? I don't know. Decide. Give her a birthday party, send her a card, whatever. So clarifying what you're going to do, if anything, about these things that have your attention. What are you going to do about the credit line? Well, maybe I should look into whether I could. How are you going to do that? What's the next step? So outcome and action then become the part of the core elements of step 2, which is you need to go through all the things on your to-do list. I imagine most of the people listening to this have some sort of a to-do list, but most of the people listening to this, if they look at their to-do list, are going to see neither one. They're going to see things written down that do not represent what the goal is, nor does it represent what the next play is. So you need to, secondly, go through all of that stuff so you can throw away those lists, because you've now determined what's the project and what's the next action. But if you can't finish those things when you think about them and when you make those decisions, then you need step 3. I need to now organize essentially the inventory of my commitments at these 2 levels. What are the projects I have? Research upgrading credit line. Great, that's a project. Would go on my project list. What's the next action? I think I need to call my banker and see, and so whatever. Great, so call Fred Jones or whatever. That then goes on a calls list. So when you're at a phone and feel like making phone calls and have some time, you see that as an option of things that you need to do in terms of your work. So once you've clarified action and outcome, then you need to park those someplace. So step 3 is then organize those reminders. So that's then what you need to do with those. And then you need to make sure you trust the system that you wrote. You need to look at the stuff you've written down. And that's step 4, which is reflect. I need to now take a look at my calendar, take a look at what time I have, take a look at the phone calls I need to make, take a look at the stuff I need to talk to my life partner about, and be review and reflecting on this inventory, a lot more, than most people do. And then step 5 is then engage. Okay, now should I take a nap? Should I call my banker? Should I go to this meeting? What do I do next? How do I allocate my attention and my resources? So those 5 steps, which are capture, clarify, organize, reflect, and engage, that's how you get your kitchen under control. It's how you get your company under control. It's how you get your consciousness under control. But most people don't actually do those to any, to any appropriate extent. So learning to do those on a consistent basis makes a huge, huge difference. Sorry. Yeah, that's how people actually get this stuff under control. And that's, then relieves your brain of having to remember and remind. Then you're using your intelligence and your intuition to make good choices about what to do. But until you've done that process with those things, your brain is not going to be as accessible to make the smart decisions you need as a new entrepreneur.
I know you mentioned to-do lists, but what would you recommend for someone's to-do list? Like, how many items should they have on it?
As many as they have.
And then, do you think they should?
You have as many as you have. You either track them externally or internally. So people get mad at me for their list. I'm going, excuse me, that ain't my list, dude. That's yours. What do you have attention on? Oh, my vacation. Great. You want to keep it in your head? Your head has no sense of past or future, so your head will keep then bothering you about stuff you ought to be doing about it. So it's much more efficient to externalize all these things, make a decision about the things you need to do. And by the way, Trevor, most people have between 30 and 100 projects and between 150 and 220 next actions about them all, if you include all the personal stuff. And if you take the broad definition of project as I do, which is any multi-step thing that's going to take you, more than one action to finish.
Let's say someone has all these actions on their to-do list. Do you just recommend doing the immediate ones that have to get done right away and then just start the list and then work down from there?
Well, we have the 2-minute rule. The 2-minute rule says any action you can take in 2 minutes should never even be on the list. It should have been done the first time you saw it or thought of it, because it would take you longer to organize it and review it than to do it, if you're ever going to do it at all. So, yeah, the 2-minute stuff should already be done. It doesn't need to be on a list. And that I've had a lot of executives tell me just the 2-minute rule that I trained them on saved their life. They became, wow, I could hand that off, I could delegate that, I could write that email back in 2 minutes or less, and it just so reduced their backlog, that it made a huge difference in their life. So just even that simple little tip can make a huge difference. So yeah, the longer the 2-minute stuff, Trevor, I'm old enough and cranky enough to say, and I've done this for 35 plus years, I just do what I feel like doing. But and a lot of times that's not even on my list. It's like I look at my list and I go, and then I say, hey, I'm going to go paint. And so I go do that instead of doing anything on my list. But I only have the freedom to do that with clarity because I looked at the list and said, no, painting right now is better than any of that. But you can only feel good about what you're not doing when you know what you're not doing. So reviewing, that's why the reflection of this, you need to be able to look at all that and say, okay, right now, taking a nap, hanging out with my spouse, playing with my dog, painting, drawing, playing my flute, doing nothing right now would be more important. But you have to be mature enough to be able to then do that. But that's very hard to do if you haven't externalized all this stuff so you can renegotiate them with yourself.
Let's say someone's blocking out time to work. Do you recommend certain intervals in which they should work?
I think that's quite individual and personal to people's style and their energy. First of all, one of the things we highly, highly recommend that most people are not doing is what we refer to as the weekly review, where once you get this stuff out of your head and you have these lists, once a week you need to step back and take a look at all of this stuff and bring it forward, keep it current, and remind yourself about where you've been. Catch all that reminds me I need to. Look at your upcoming stuff. Look at any due dates you've got on anything. And spend about 2 hours a week doing the sort of executive overviewing operationally of your life and your work. And most people are not doing that. It's a very rare person to find who's built in that very, very powerful and important productivity habit, which is the weekly review. Once a week, you need to back off, not too far. Stare at your navel, walk around the rose garden, decide your life purpose. That's fine too. But I'm talking about backing off and getting your list of projects current again. All the stuff that's showed up in the last few days, you haven't had a chance to objectify or clarify, but you got it. That important phone call that came in, that new meeting that showed up, the new opportunity that suddenly came around the corner you didn't expect. And we don't have time during the week usually to grab and clarify and get objective and elegant about all this stuff. It happens too fast. But that's why you need to build in some sort of a regular reconnaissance with yourself, a regular oasis where you back the world away and then bring everything current and then think about it. So when you're doing that, once you've done that, that makes making instant priority decisions so much easier in terms of as you navigate, through your life in terms of what you're doing. So, that's an important element that solves so many of these other issues about how do I set priorities, how do I deal with all this stuff on my list and make decisions about what to do. You need to, build in these processes and these habits that kind of hardwire your intuitive intelligence. So you're making good decisions about, on the fly. So I don't know if that answered your questions or what you brought up, but that was an important point I think that people need to know about the productivity game.
No, that was excellent. And I wanted to ask you, how do you set up your days for productivity?
The night before, I make sure I look at my calendar for the next day or two. Because my calendar has only 3 things on the calendar. It has time-specific stuff, appointments, things like this, this chat that I'm having with you. Day-specific stuff, like things that need to happen today, but any time is fine. So those are not appointments. But sometime today, I need to make this video for a client of mine, right? Anytime is fine, but he needs to have it by tomorrow morning. So sometime today, I need to be able to do that. So that's on my calendar, right? Not tied to a time, it's just tied to the day. And then the third thing is day-specific information. And that information could be, hey, David, in 2 weeks, you've got this thing coming up. Do you want to start on it now? It could be, hey, David, Catherine, my wife, is going to be in a seminar in between X, Y, and Z. Or I may have on there, hey, between 2 and 4 this afternoon, the server's going to be down, so don't try to send emails. So that my calendar has nothing else but that. So my calendar doesn't have, gee, I'd like to. It only has the things that'll die if I don't do them, or things that I must know about on that day or about that day. So that's an important map to look at. Like navigating in a boat, I need to look at a map. So that map I look at the night before to see the hard lands, what I call the hard landscape. Hard landscape is brick and mortar, pools, et cetera. Soft landscape is, things you can move around and plants and things like that. So I look at what I call the hard landscape. The reason I do that is because I like to sleep as long as I can. I'm a big sleep fan. So that lets me know when I need to wake up in the morning and kind of tease up in my consciousness internally to kind of what the blueprint or structure of the day is going to be. And that's pretty much it, Trevor, in terms of how I organize that. Now, keep in mind, I'm doing regular weekly reviews. Regularly, I'm looking back and, thinking strategically about things. So I'm regularly thinking from a priority scale about all that stuff, but it all rolls down to, okay, what are the actions I need to take? What are the things I need to do about all that? And once you come down to that sort of very tactical level, just checking in on the hard landscape for the day. And then when I have free time, then I will make a sort of intuitive, spontaneous decision about, okay, what are all the other things that I've got I might want or need to do or be interested in doing, right now. So I try to plan in a way as little as I can, but as much as I have to, so I feel comfortable about what I'm doing and not doing.
David, I just want to say this interview has been excellent so far, and now we're going to enter the Lions round, where I'm just going to ask you a couple of quick questions before we end the show today.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to someone who's just starting out and going after their dream?
Relax. You'll be much smarter about what you're doing if you relax. Now, when I say relax, I'm not talking about 6 beers in front of the TV. I'm talking about let go, relax, and listen more to the internal process that's going on. Called, where are you really going? What really matters to you? I would also say, and along with that, that having a sense of what it is, what would wild success look like for you? And that could be in terms of material things you might want to have, impact you might want to make on the world, and it could be just internal experience. I would love to have the experience of being successful and knowing what I'm doing and that I'm serving, the planet in optimal ways. So it could be any and all of that, but I think oftentimes people, I think, put too much and not enough energy on that vision, purpose, big goal kind of thing. You need to be quite sincere about them, but not serious about them. So you need to give yourself the freedom to make a bad judgment call. If you're trying to write a novel, write a crappy first draft. That's the best way to get started. So, write a crappy first draft about what you think your life vision is, or where you'd like to go, or what wild success would be. What is it? What are you really after? And I think clarifying that and keeping that as an ongoing exercise. Hey, let me make a judgment call right now about what I think that is. Write it down, draw a picture, create a treasure map or something, and then be willing to change that tomorrow when you get better data, because you will. As you get more mature, your images and your goals will mature. So, relax. That's a lot of that. Relax about that. At the same time, a lot of entrepreneurs are not relaxed, obviously, and probably appropriately so, because they, you want to create something, you want to do something, you got a fire in your belly about X, Y, and Z. Great. Just acknowledge that and just relax and say, okay, what's the next thing about that? And, obviously, a lot of what I teach helps a lot of folks in that situation be able to ground that and say, okay, so what do I now need to do next? So you need to be physically engaged and not blow a fuse and procrastinate. You need to be willing to go, okay, great. Here's what I think the next step is toward that vision. Let me call Fred, see if I can set up a lunch with him and, just chat with him about what I'm thinking about. Or, let me just draft some ideas about this right now. Or let me just, who knows what it is. But everybody has something to do toward whatever that vision is. So some version of what we started this conversation about, outcome and action. Where are you trying to produce? What would success really mean to you? And great, what's the next step? What do you need to do about that? So if you keep that in mind, we're teaching that to 7-year-olds. I'm teaching that to some of the most successful CEOs you'd ever meet. Same thing, different content in terms of their answers, but it's the same process. And it doesn't show up naturally or automatically. It is actually something you need to train a cognitive muscle, for yourself to do.
And for someone who wants to feel more relaxed, would you recommend something like meditation?
Oh, that always helps. Walk around the block, take your dog for a pee, have a good glass of wine, anything that lets you relax and step back and let go. Because it's so easy for all of us. I still do get wrapped around the axle. We get tied up in the weeds down there. And, maintaining perspective is probably the most valuable commodity on the planet. And you can increase your perspective through all those means. Anything that kind of change. You can take a vacation, go somewhere different, go have coffee at a different coffee shop, or write some poetry, whatever it is that might shift your gears so you see things from a different perspective and allows you to let go. I just have my screensaver just has 2 words. It's just called let go. Because, I'm 71 years old. I still need to train myself to come on, David, you got too serious about that. Let go. Because as I let go, there's another part of me that I'm able to pay more attention to. The intuitive part, the higher self part of myself, the part of me that has higher perspective, altitude, and attitude. And so I think that's the best advice any of us, that's the best advice I can give anybody, pretty much about anything. But that's maybe because I'm kind of old and cranky now.
Do you happen to have 2 or 3 books that you recommend for our audience to read?
I always have my book du jour. There's lots of great books out there. I don't know that there's any one that I would say. A lot of it really depends on what people are interested in, and in terms of the books, my book. If you're interested, come on, the new edition of Getting Things Done is an inspiring book. So, relative to any of this stuff, I reread my own stuff. It re-inspires me because I come up with this stuff, but then I don't do it all the time. I just need to train myself, and I'm my own worst and best student. So. That's probably a recommendation of mine. I would suggest maybe if you're interested in the brain stuff, how your brain works, there's and also especially in the digital world, what you need to start to pay attention to in terms of your addiction to social media and things that could distract you like crazy. There's a wonderful book out there called Brain Chains, 2 words, like brain, like your brain, and chains, like the tire chains, like the chains around your brain that are constricting its ability to be at its optimal state. And that's came up a couple of years ago, and it's a lot about how you need to understand how your mind actually works, and it's pretty deep stuff. A guy, a Belgian who major researcher, psychiatrist, psychologist, doctor, did all the research in cognitive science about what your brain is not very good at doing. So it just validates a lot of what I've been talking about here. So that's a great book. So basically what I recommend for people in terms of books, walk into a bookstore or surf Amazon or whatever kind of bookstore, whatever it is, and follow your intuitive hunches. That's what I've done. I've never found some strategy or formula about what I wanted to read or what I thought would find value. But if I just kind of let myself relax again, let go, I just walk in and see what your intuition says. I wonder why that book attracts me. I don't know. Let me just buy it. And that's given me some of the best books I've ever read.
David, last question of the day. Where can our audience find you?
www.gettingthingsdone.com. There's a lot of free information on that. That's how you can see where I am, kind of what we're doing. We're doing our GTD and Getting Things Done trainings now all over the world. So if you go to our website, if you're not in the U.S. specifically, though the U.S. is available as well. But you can go to global partners and you'll see where trainings are being done around the world, with this stuff. So that's a way to do it. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm GTD Guy, GTDGUY. And that's kind of how to get in touch if you want.
And David, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time today to speak with our audience.
Thanks for listening to Become the Lion. Everything from today's show will be in our show notes on our website. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Till next week, don't stop grinding.